Throughout most of history, women adopted unnatural forms and postures to satisfy the culturally accepted concepts of fashion and femininity. In the early 1900s, clothing was inspired by King Edward VII's luxurious and extravagant life. Fashion trends from 1890 to 1914 were known as the Edwardian era. During this period in time, women would exaggerate their hips, wore big hats, gloves, corsets, and would keep their legs hidden with long, heavy skirts and dresses that would give their body an unnatural S shape. In the early 1900s, they eventually began embracing their natural forms, and fashion began to loosen up and lose their tailored lines of the Edwardian era. Because designers like Paul Pierrot designed clothes without corsets. However, when World War I began, it dramatically changed fashion.
Everyone thought the war would be quick, and it wasn't until 1915 that women were allowed to take over what were once men's jobs. Women went from working as domestic servants to working in factories, as drivers, nurses, farm workers, volunteering at organizations like the Red Cross, and some even joined the army. Their new duties weren't easy to fulfill in the Edwardian style clothing, so fashion changed to allow movement. Fashion was now inspired by the military. They wore tunics, jackets, epaulets, belts, and clothing with more pockets. Fashion shows were also becoming popular and were often organized to raise funds for the war efforts. Fashion during this time revolved more around the needs of the lower class than the wealthy. Clothing was made plainer, wearing no jewelry, and less color. Sportswear also began to change. Swimsuits became less about covering their bodies and more about their ability to swim, creating the one-piece bathing suit.
One of the most influential designers during this time was Coco Chanel. Coco Chanel was a big impact during the 20th century. She introduced a huge side of fashion that was never shown before. She introduced the little black dress. The little black dress was usually worn at funerals, but Chanel set trends.
By 1915, the hemlines were raised several inches above the ankle. Since women were now revealing more of their legs, Gillette introduced the Melody Decollet razors for women in the 1916s. Shaving now became an everyday routine for women, along with applying cosmetics. Maybelline, a cosmetics brand, began in 1915. They agreed with makeup becoming acceptable for women, especially the working class who can now pay for it. The main products used were powder, kohl eyeliner, and mascara. Since cosmetics became acceptable, there was a rise in demand for face creams from the wealthier nurses on the front. Depending on their job, women often wore trousers, but would borrow them from the men because it took decades for them to finally be acceptable for women. Women's jackets were also made looser to increase the range of motion and allow them to work more comfortably. Some of these fashion trends still remain today, and if it wasn't for women's change in role, the fashion trends wouldn't have changed either.